So my comment is then to 1554, meaning that God can be experienced here in the world of uncertainty, because the world of uncertainty gives you the practice of your values and seeing what the consequences are. So you are now, as a person born again, so to speak, practicing being devoted to your God. And you start to find out that your God is not quite something that when practiced brings harmony and peace and goodness, health and vitality and joy and love and kindness and loyalty, blue skies, summer. So you adjust your view of what you want, what you value, and you start to home in on a valid view of God, more valid than you had when you first started on this pilgrimage, more valid than you recognized when you first were born again, so to speak, to use Christian jargon. And that is why you've been left in the universe a moment longer. We are being taught here. But we are being taught here in an uncertain universe with a certainty. Just that we don't know it's a certainty until we do it. We're still experiencing the certainty of following God being right as Heavenly Father. It's just that our view of what's right is changing from our experience of doing such. We are homing in on adulthood whilst we are left here. And I suspect that anyone left here, no matter how saintly, is still homing in on adulthood, else they would be taken. For God does not need me here. He could have anyone here doing what I'm doing. He's only having me doing it because I need it and he loves and cares for me. And sure, I'm motivated to be here to love and help others, and that's good, but I'm not here to be devoted to others, to sacrifice myself for others. That's a complete misunderstanding. I'm not here to be vowed to a partner, wife, husband. I'm not here to expect my children to be utterly loyal to me. Not here to expect my parents, earthly parents, to always love me. Do you see? I'm here knowing I'm in the world of uncertainty, practicing loving God as my Heavenly Father, and learning from that practice how to come into a harmony which will allow me to graduate and leave this universe of uncertainty or heaven, where I am already established in eternity. Quite glorious, with all the other very glorious adult children of God and our Heavenly Father. Thank you, Heavenly Father. So I can say to any religious person, yeah, okay, you're on the right path, you're being religious, you're doing what you understand to be right, worshipping your God. But you're still here. And that implies to me, because you're still in this universe, there's still work to be done, that your view of God is not completely sound. Your values are not completely right. I don't mean that what I'm seeing as wrong in your values is the thing that's wrong, but something's wrong, else you wouldn't be here, just like me. Something's wrong with my view of God, or I would not still be here in this universe chatting to you. Unless I'm some avatar that's been sent, all perfect and come to guide you, which is what we say Jesus is, in some sense. He's the perfect one. He had no sin, no need to be here. He's here purely for our benefit and blessing. Well, that's lovely. I mean, if I'm that, well, that's, I was going to say that's good news, but I'm not so sure as it is, given Jesus gets crucified in the story. Or chooses to be. I would choose not to be, okay? And you may think, there you are, you see, that's the thing that's wrong. You're not choosing to be crucified. I'm not sure if that's what's wrong. I think there might be something else wrong. Something much more mundane, perhaps, but perhaps just as significant as you see crucifixion. As I see crucifixion, of course, that it's God suffering. We're being told he suffers for us. Well, perhaps we agree on that point. So, this other person's view of God, of course, is not entirely right. Else they wouldn't be here talking to you, in general. Whether you know what's wrong with their view of God is quite another point, of course. And you simply are more preoccupied with the fact that my view of God must be wrong in some sense, in that I'm still here. Now, I don't know how major this fault is. It is major in that it's causing me to still be here on Earth, in the world of uncertainty, in the universe of uncertainty. So we hold ourselves very ready to learn continuously. Wow. Thank you, Heavenly Father. Well, it starts to dawn on us, doesn't it, that by this practice, there's so much uncertainty, and yet God keeps coming up with a solution to your dilemma, and you still live on. You're still provided for. You're still here. How amazing. You've had the confirmation of God's provision when you trust in him. You've had difficulties, and then you trusted him for the difficulties, and you've come through. Wow. What have I still got wrong, Lord, that's keeping me here? What have I still got wrong? Well, let's look at what I'm suffering. Now, hang on. I thought you said practice whatsoever is good and lovely. Think on these things. And you're now going to look at identifying what might be wrong in your life. Oh, yes, but not from the point of view of despair, but from the point of view of, you may be showing me what I can put right. Well, that's going to be so if the consequence of what I'm doing wrong leads back to what I'm doing wrong. I mean, if I touch a flame, something that's too hot, like, oh, that burns. It's instant, isn't it? I associate the burning and the mistake with putting my hand out there and touching it. Don't do that in future. Value avoiding touching things that may be too hot. Values have been reinforced accordingly, haven't they? Don't do things that destroy the body. We don't want to destroy the body. Right. So in what I hope I'm saying is, in your daily practice of whatsoever is good and lovely, think on these things. When you notice something that's not good and lovely, well, you still thank him for it, not because you understand it to be enjoyable in itself, but because you anticipate that God has allowed it to be a blessing, and you just can't see in what way it's a blessing yet. Now, it's a blessing so far in that it's telling you, you haven't got your view quite right. There are difficulties. Now, that's not heaven to have difficulties. That's part of the universe of uncertainty, change, and inharmony, right? What am I doing that makes it valid to have this inharmony? And by doing, I mean, what am I valuing wrongly that's causing this inharmony in my life? Now, I could say that, now this is a real turn, try this one. I could say that being devoted to my ex-wife is not right. In fact, we should be devoted to God. We should love one another, yes. We should bless one another and be helpful, and indeed be neighbour to one another, which is rather weaker than loving one another. And certainly not as strong as being devoted to one another. We're commended to be a neighbour. We're not commended to be devoted to one another. Jesus does not hold with marriage in this way. He points out that those in the kingdom of heaven neither marry nor are given in marriage. And we immediately think, well, you mean they're not in a sexual relationship, if you're really earthly of earth. Or you may think rather more sweetly, they don't get married in heaven, they remain celibate. He's not talking about either. He could be talking about the fact that you're not meant to be devoted to other children of God. Your devotion is to God as Heavenly Father. Perhaps always. in heaven as well. You're not devoted to each other. You love each other, yes. That's wonderful. But you're not devoted to anyone other than God. And it is that commonality of being devoted to God as he reveals himself that is your assurance of all things being well. Something close to that. Ah, yes, and what I wanted to say was, with this decision not to be devoted to my wife, but simply love her as another human being that needs love and care, and benefits from such, but it's not my principal duty in life. My principal duty is devotion to God, with all my heart, soul, mind, and strength. And if I just love my wife, ex-wife, I may well find much more of the harmony that I'm seeking. Either that I'm free enough to find an alternative wife, or free enough to be much happier just loving God than being devoted to her, or free enough to just love her and have her continue in my ongoing company without being devoted to her and squeezing God out. But I have to get through that barrier of being devoted to my wife. So am I now saying, oh, you're such a noble person, Marshall, you've been devoting yourself to all these different wives and they've all treated you badly? No, I'm saying you were wrong, Marshall, to be devoted to your wives and to your mum. We know why you were devoted to your mum, but you're still wrong. You should have just loved her, and indeed, I think you did just love her. You realized you couldn't care for her when she'd left your dad, and you put her on a train to her mum, where she could live, be provided for, be a blessing to her mum, and her circumstances be a blessing to her. You were neighbour to her, instead of devoted son. You then felt guilty about this, but not quite. I knew I did what had to be done. Wow, not bad for a young man. I'm impressed. Gosh, the ego of you, Marshall, I don't know what to do about you. And now, of course, he's applying it to all his wives too. They all left for a very good reason. He'd made a mistake. He shouldn't have been devoted to them. But you know the world thinks this. They're not impressed when they see that I'm always being seen with my wife, always doing everything together. Nothing's worth doing except it's with the wife. They're not impressed with that. And actually rightly so. But for the wrong reasons, of course. The right reason is that the devotion should really be to God. Otherwise you're holding on to something that won't necessarily be there. When you're assuming it for your safety and you're not safe. Relying on something that won't necessarily be there. And no vow or promise is going to manage to overcome that. Certainly we value integrity and we do what we can to be honest and true, faithful and just. But our real devotion is still greater than that, which is to be faithful and true to God. He is priority. That principle is over all others. So it's best for me not to make a vow to you or a promise to you, for I may not keep it in the ultimate. I will still put God first, as I understand him to be. That's who I am, and that's what eternity is. And this is what it is to know God, to love him, your God, with all your heart, soul, mind and strength. All devotion is to him, you see. Not to your neighbour. You're loving your neighbour as yourself. This person that's rescued you, you love him as yourself. You're not devoted to him. You're devoted to God. Oh, thank you, Heavenly